Hey, welcome to the Cannabis Man podcast. Thanks for clicking on the show. I'm Don Kleppen, and if it's your first time here, this is a podcast where we try to take a journalistic look at all things cannabis. I'm a broadcaster in Chicago, and I do news for radio here. I do traffic reports, and I've been a personal cannabis user for 15 or 16 years, and I try to talk with different people involved in the cannabis industry every week, whether those are growers, whether they're policymakers, entrepreneurs, people who are creating products, researchers, or just people who are either discovering it or running companies having to do with it, people who are on the forefront of what's changing in the cannabis industry, and there's things changing every day in the U.S. We have 2 new states, as I sit here recording this on November 9th, 2022, 2 new states in this year's midterm elections just voted for recreational legal cannabis in their states, putting the U.S. at 21 now, which is very, very exciting. So I've got that to talk about. Also, the news joint wrap, some news stories and events are related to cannabis around Illinois. Also have the strain of the week to tell you about. This one's very tasty, and have some other topics to discuss as well outside of that interview. If you haven't already, go ahead and leave a rating or review for the show. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple or iHeart, whichever podcast platform you're using right now, if you can leave a rating or review for the Cannabis Man podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. And a big thank you to everyone who has already done that. It definitely helps me out a lot. And with that, let's get into this 30th episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Kick things off with the news joint wrap. This is a collection of news stories or events coming up related to cannabis in or around Illinois, and it's all put together by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Jason Brown does a fantastic job gathering the news stories, talking with people, conducting interviews, and bringing you important information specifically about Illinois cannabis. And let's start with the estimates for Illinois cannabis sales this year, which IllinoisNewsJoint.com is expecting to pass $1.6 billion with a B. Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, IDFPR, announced October's rec sales totals. October adult use sales landed at $131,547,030.86. Some of that came from out-of-state residents, 40,662,000 in fact, and in-state resident totals finished around 90,884,000. That puts Illinois at $1.2 billion, a little more than that so far in recreational cannabis sales for 2022, and we still have November and December sales to tally. Estimates put Illinois surpassing $1.7 billion in cannabis recreational sales. And this is a story that came out last week, but still very exciting nonetheless. Diddy combs to acquire cannabis assets in Illinois. There's been plenty of celebrity cannabis endorsements from Ryan Sandberg to Mike Tyson. Also, Ric Flair was recently in the state, former wrestler there. And now the chairman and CEO of Combs Enterprises and cultural icon Sean Diddy Combs, formerly the rapper known as Puff Daddy, he has taken it a step further. Cresco Labs and Columbia Care announced last week the signing of definitive agreements to divest certain Illinois as well as New York and Massachusetts assets. So 3 states, including Illinois, they are going to an entity owned and controlled by Combs. Combs is set in Illinois to acquire Jefferson Park and Villa Park retail assets, so dispensaries there, as well as a production asset in Aurora, so a grow facility. The vertically integrated assets provide Combs the ability to grow and manufacture cannabis products, wholesale and distribute those branded products to licensed dispensaries, and operate stores in major metro areas such as Chicago. So this is going to set the stage for more dispensaries to be opened by Combs as well. This This is Combs' first investment in cannabis, and again, involved in 3 states, and here in Illinois, certainly it sets the stage for more dispensaries to come up and get running under Combs Enterprises. So this is good and exciting for a few different reasons. It'll be interesting to, as we've mentioned, there aren't that many Black-owned cannabis companies up and operational in Illinois yet, and this is certainly a big player in this game, and I'll be very curious and interested to see what the price point is, what kind of brands we see come out from Diddy, and where these dispensaries pop up, and all of that, especially to say nothing of perhaps some lounge smoking experiences, and what kind of parties are we going to get here. I bet you any of these dispensaries that Diddy launches, I'm expecting a hell of a launch party for these things. So very exciting for the Illinois cannabis industry at large, and certainly a big welcome to Diddy Combs into Illinois, New York, and Massachusetts cannabis markets. And the last story here of the news joint wrap, KVL Flower Ball Cannabis Expo has unfortunately been canceled. After months of buildup and preparation for dozens of brands, operators, the inaugural KVL International Flower Ball has been canceled. 1937 Group and KVL were set to host that ball from Sin City Studios last weekend, but unfortunately that event had to be canceled. There was a notice in part states, quote, "We come to you with extremely heavy hearts." The city of Chicago informed Sin City Studios and KVL International that they would not allow us to have the KVL Flower Ball. Still quoting here, it was made apparent that we have a target on our back. It's unfortunate we were not given the courtesy about the shutdown in advance, and we are sincerely disheartened by the situation. They say that they work diligently to adhere to all regulations and make the event an example of how Chicago can come together. Eventbrite is automatically sending refunds for anybody who purchased tickets. The statement goes on and sort of concludes by saying, along with offering everyone a refund, they're working diligently to find a space to host a private event for all ticket holders so you can still have an enjoyable night with us in your flower ball attire. So keep an eye out for that. I will certainly bring an update when this flower ball, this KVL International and 1937 Group flower ball actually gets up and going. Whenever they do find a space to hold the private event, clearly they'll try this again, and whenever they get word about that, you can certainly hear about it here, or you can find out more information about all of those news stories and any future events in and around Illinois, all at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. And before I bring on my guest this week, I wanted to get into the strain of the week. Listener, we're sitting down to record this November 9th of 2022. This is one day after the midterm elections, November 8th, and the only reason that's pertinent information here is because there were 5 states that had adult use recreational cannabis initiatives on their ballots. That would be North and South Dakota, Arkansas, Missouri, and Maryland. And of those 5, 2 of them passed their ballot initiatives. 3 of them declined or failed to pass the initiatives. The 2 that succeeded in bringing adult use cannabis markets to their states were Maryland and Missouri. Give it up for these 2 states here. Yeah. Really good stuff. This is great because now the U.S. at large has 21 of the 50 states. 21 of them have adult use recreational cannabis markets. It's going to take Maryland and Missouri a little bit to get their markets up and running. It might be a year, might be a couple of years. There have been examples of states like Maine that took several years to kind of get up and going. So we'll see when they actually get some dispensaries up and how long that actually takes. But officially right now we have 21 states, and it's really great. And so I'm celebrating a little bit with a small glass of tequila. This is some Blanco that I'm sipping on, along with my cannabis strain of the week. So cheers. Yes, it's certainly very exciting to be adding more states to the corral of legal cannabis markets in the U.S. The more we get on board here, the higher the wave climbs, the more the momentum moves forward, and hopefully, again, it'll reach Washington, D.C., and eventually the federal government will have no choice. The more states do this, they're going to have to remove cannabis from the Schedule I status. They're going to have to legalize, or it's certainly at least decriminalize, once we get over a majority of states that have markets going. And again, we've already got 37 states doing it medicinally, and so the Schedule I status, which says anything on this list has no medicinal value, that's already past the point of absurdity with 37 states with legal medical markets for cannabis and the federal government saying that it has no medical value. That's already past the point of absurdity. But the more states legalize here, the more we're going to get that pressure. The more states legalize, the more that pressure on Washington continues. And this issue is definitely not going anywhere anytime soon. But I want to share with you the very, very great strain of the week that I have been smoking on this week. And the strain I've got, it is a sativa. Shocker, I know. But the sativa that I've got going here is a relatively new strain. It is Glutang Haze, and it's in the form of pre-rolls from GTI's Dog Walkers. And if you haven't had these GTI Dog Walkers, that'd be Green Thumb Industries, these are excellent. I shared an image of this product on the show Instagram and Twitter pages at C-Man Podcast for both of those. There's also the Cannabis Man Podcast YouTube page. I've put some of these things up on there and some short videos and whatnot. So you can see a picture of these things, and the Dog Walkers, I just love them. They're very tiny, they're short, they're pre-rolled, but they're well crafted. The burn is smooth. I never have any canoeing or any weirdness, and they are just the right size for an afternoon walk if you are literally walking a dog, or if you're just needing an anytime pick-me-up. They're small enough where it's really just kind of a handful of hits, and I love these things. Again, not being paid to say this either. This is an unsponsored plug here. But another nice thing before I get into details of the strain here, these mini dog pre-rolls, anytime you buy these things, they donate a portion of proceeds from every product sold to deserving animal shelters across the country. So if you're in the mood for a cannabis product and you feel like helping some sheltered pets around the country, you can go ahead and buy these Dog Walkers at most dispensaries. I've seen them at Sunnyside. That's usually where I get mine, but you know that they're going to be at the Rise dispensaries as well, because those are GTI's dispensary arm. Green Thumb operates through the Rise dispensaries, and I highly recommend the Dog Walkers. They come in a pack of 5 small pre-rolled joints, and it's just this perfect tiny little container that I love keeping these in my pocket just in case, you're in the mood or, as I said, need a pick-me-up. This is a new strain, Glutang Haze flower in these Dog Walkers, and it is a crossbreed between Tangerine Haze and Gorilla Glue. And it's a heavy sativa. There's almost kind of a nervous energy, but you do get that creative euphoria. You definitely get a little boost. So as I said, these are perfect for that pick-me-up thing. And there is definitely a citrusy aftertaste. As you can probably guess from the Tangerine Haze, this has a lot of citrus notes to it, both in the aroma as well as the aftertaste as well. I enjoy it for the pick-me-up bit of it. This strain is interesting because there are some sativas which I feel like lend themselves to giving you the munchies pretty well. This strain does not do that. I've smoked a couple of these Dog Walkers now, and there's no hint of munchies at really any point during this any of these joints onsets for several hours after I hit it. I didn't really notice any kind of incentive to eat, or I didn't really feel motivated or like I had an extra appetite for anything. So munchies not really a factor with Glutang Haze, but as I said, definitely a good pick-me-up, definitely some good citrus, and definitely some sativa energy. If you feel like doing something creative or you feel like a daytime smoke, this Glutang Haze flower from GTI and in the form of Dog Walkers, highly recommend these things. They're tiny, but it's a little boost of energy in a citrus package, and pick these up at a GTI or Sunnyside or wherever dispensary you might find yourself in Illinois. Keep an eye out for the Dog Walkers and get yourself some Glutang Haze flower. By the way, I read something interesting recently that there's a growing body of research that says holding in an inhale of cannabis any longer than 3 seconds or so doesn't really do much by way of increasing the high or the THC compounds in the blood or any of that. I've read and I've heard over the years plenty of people who will, and I've done this myself where I've held it in I've held it in for super long and, 10, 15 seconds or whatever just to try and increase. And I was reading recently that doesn't really do much of anything. And you're, better off not depriving your brain of oxygen for that long for no reason at all. So, 3 seconds is about how long you're meant to hold in the hit. And you're pretty much maxing out your intake at 3 seconds. So just a little tip that I read recently and I'm trying to incorporate. Listener, my next guest is a registered nurse and founded the Cannabis Nurses. She had used cannabis in her own life to deal with some unpleasant symptoms that she was experiencing, and she also runs a women's group called the Canna Queens Club and is educating women all the time on the uses of cannabis and how they can benefit from them. And she's giving her clients a relief in a variety of ways and helping people around the world to understand cannabinoids and their bodies. She also has, I believe, a book coming out, the first accredited cannabis nursing. Listener, please welcome Kayla Sanmartin. Welcome, Kayla.
Hi, Don. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. So I really just like to kind of start by getting to know you a little bit. As I mentioned, you were using cannabis in your own life to deal with some insomnia, I guess. How did you find cannabis and how did it impact your life?
It's always, I love telling the story and I love actually hearing other people in the industry, their whys behind, why they're in this cannabis industry, because they're really typically quite powerful. And how I came to cannabis would have been in my late 20s. I grew up in a small farming community. I was headed off to nursing school. I thought for my career, I'd be an ICU or an emerge nurse for my career, and that's what I wanted to do. And in my third year university, I really started to struggle with insomnia. Really strong family history of insomnia and anxiety in our family, and just sort of stress started to pile up, and doing shift work and all that, those intense things that can happen led to not sleeping for many, many weeks. And, after it became so debilitating at that time in my life, you have a symptom, you have something wrong, you go to the doctor. That's what you do, right? And at the age of 21, I was started on sleeping pills and anxiety medications. And yes, they did help with my insomnia, but I didn't like taking them. I didn't like how I felt in the mornings, but I relied on them because they were the only thing that got me to sleep through the night, which was essential to be able to go and be fit to work as a nurse and, do life. Sleep is so essential. So I used them. And being a nurse, I knew that, using them nightly over a long extended period of time is not what sleeping pills are recommended for, though many use them that way. And that's how I used them. And I used them for 5 years straight every single night. And never once in those 5 years was I questioned by a medical professional about, let's dive deeper into this. Let's find out more about your insomnia. But they were working for me and I used them. And then it wasn't until after I'd started nursing and graduated from university and had been married and all that, those big life things, that the universe, I kind of say, slapped me in the face, and I unexpectedly became pregnant. So I flushed those pills down the toilet because I knew that they weren't conducive with a pregnancy. And I was like, okay, here we go. This is finally my sign and my time to stop using sleeping pills. And I never liked using them. I hated using them, but they were the only thing that worked at that time. So after 3 weeks of debilitating insomnia, no sleep whatsoever, I miscarried that pregnancy.
Oh,
and
gosh.
Who knows what the outcome was or why that pregnancy miscarried. We don't know. We never know, right?
Right.
But that was the point in my life where I hit a spot and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? I don't want to go back on sleeping pills. I know I want to have children in the future. Like, where do I go now? And so it was at rock bottom, exhausted, grieving, anxious, just at my rock bottom kind of place in my life that cannabis entered my life. And that was the start of me becoming very passionate about cannabis and really kind of lighting this fire of, why wasn't this presented to me earlier? Because now I feel really, really good. It's making me feel good. I wake up and I feel refreshed. My husband said, oh my God, I haven't seen you this bright in 5 years since you've been off your sleeping pills. And so I needed to know more. And to begin with, to even give myself permission to consume cannabis, I started to dive into the history of cannabis and start to understand why my stigmatized beliefs from my small rural farming community were what they were. And I actually made me quite angry that I had been taught so many misleading things about cannabis. So that was the start of my journey.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's incredibly relatable. Can definitely, certainly finding out about cannabis and then finding that it improved my quality of life, I felt a similar anger that you just described when, it hit me in the face that this is something that is obviously improving my quality of life. How in the world did it get such a bad reputation, and why is everyone in my life telling me to avoid this thing? And to find that not only is that not the truth, that it's not only not evil and just neutral, but actually it's very, very good, and it can improve so much about your life. That's a major thing, and I'm glad that you did find it, because I think it's also relatable to be prescribed medications to deal with problems we have in our lives, and pharmacy companies and some of these products that they make. It's a part, I know, of just the healthcare system in different countries, and I think that's a big part of the cannabis prohibition as well. So once you did find it, and now you're off of the sleeping meds, and as you said, your life just kind of improves, and you're obviously in your career as a nurse here. How did you go from knowing that it was good for you and giving yourself permission to enjoy it and all that stuff to, hey, I should really be spreading this message, and there's a lot of other people who can benefit from this too? How did you think to start, the cannabis nurses? How did that come about?
Well, it's a journey like anything. But yeah, after I started consuming cannabis, it was like, I just need to know more. I was just so incredibly curious at that point. And the funny thing is that the cannabis nurses resulted after each of my maternity leaves with my two sons. My first maternity leave, I spent a lot of time doing self-education through different institutes in the States. I'm in Canada, but I just needed to know more. And so I would connect with cannabis clinics and talk to their physicians, and got directed towards some physician level education that I did during my maternity leave. And during that time, because people knew that I was using cannabis and that it was working so well for me, they started to ask as well, and I would send them to medical cannabis clinics here in Canada. But I always found they always came back, they always needed to know more, they needed more guidance, they needed more support. And I thought, well, this is a huge gap in this industry, is that some clinics do have nurses, but not in the capacity that I thought would be really effective and really helpful for individuals to really sink into finding their own cannabis regime that suits their needs, because it is a very personal experience that you go through finding what works for you. And I just realized that many like me were in a place of like a lot of vulnerability. We're scared, anxious, not feeling well. And then to start something that's taboo is quite difficult, even with the support that we do have. So during my second maternity leave, I don't even know how it happened, but found a place called The Kind, which is in Canada here is the Canadian Institute of Integrative Nursing Development and Education.
Wow.
So it's a space here in Canada where educating nurses to come into the holistic space. In the States, you guys have like a holistic, American Holistic or Nursing Association. So there's many more holistic nurses in the States than there is in Canada. And so I started to sort of dive deeper into their website and got really curious. And I thought, oh, wow, I can run an independent practice doing what I want to do to support individuals as they start medical cannabis. And so I started to work with them and took some business courses with them about starting a practice as an independent practice as a nurse. Then as I was going through that program, they caught wind of what I was doing and what I was formulating, about formulating my Canada Queens Club for women and my structuring my programs towards women. And they called me up and they said, we need you. We need you to go through our holistic cannabis nursing program, because we need you to write us a holistic cannabis nursing program for Canada.
Wow.
And so it's not a book, it's going to be a program that's coming out. And so
Gotcha.
Through their support and doing that through my maternity leave is when that's when I created the Cannabis Nurses.
Gotcha. Well, that's very cool, and thank you for clarifying too. Just because I only saw that you were writing the first accredited cannabis nursing, but a sort of course program does make sense, and I think it's really cool that you were basically going through an education program, and they basically, that's a huge sign that you're on the right track. I think even as you're still walking it, and I think that must have been a good sign for you, that kind of like, hey, I think I maybe made the right call. There's already kind of somebody's knocking at my door,
totally.
Telling me to keep going and doing this, and that's great. So
instead of the universe slapping me in the face, they're patting me on the back and saying, keep going.
Yes, yeah. I mean, how encouraging, right? Like that really is great. So the program that you're writing, Cannabis Nurses, and the Canna Queens Club that you just mentioned to help kind of educate women on the uses and such. As you say, this is in Canada, and is it headquartered in any? Where are your headquarters, and kind of how can people get involved if they'd like?
Okay, yeah. So I'm in Alberta, just outside of Edmonton, is where I'm located currently.
Okay.
Though my Canna Queens Club that I do is just a free club over Zoom that we once a month kind of gather together as women. I provide some education and then just provide some space to either tell cannabis stories or ask questions. And so that's just once a month. They can head to my website, thecannabisnurses.ca, and sign up for free on there to join the Canna Queens Club. And then down the line on my website will be more about the accredited holistic cannabis nursing program that's going to be coming out in 2023. So that's just in the works currently.
Got it. That's very cool and good to know that this is because it's a Zoom meetings. This is a global initiative. Anybody anywhere could jump on to one of these meetings and learn more about cannabis and kind of how it can improve their life just by going to your website, thecannabisnurses.ca, and just kind of looking for the link there.
Yeah.
So the program that you're working on here, what are some of the, I would say, I guess, focuses of it? It might be a broad question, but I'm just kind of curious. Your website, The Cannabis Nurses, does have a lot of good information right at the front page about how some women's health sort of potential problems and how cannabis can help with those. Why do you believe cannabis, it's great for everybody, but why specifically for women?
I believe that it's really, really powerful for women because next to the brain, the female pelvis has the most endocannabinoid system receptors, and the endocannabinoid system fluctuates alongside female hormones. So when we can come to a space and be educated about the female body and the fluctuation of the endocannabinoid system alongside the hormones, and then present them with, now you have your own toolbox. This is your wellness toolbox. If you know how to use it, you can tap into how you're feeling and then dose from there in a way that works for you. And so it's kind of switching the paradigm that we're used to in Western medicine of, I don't feel good, something is wrong with my body, I'm going to go to a physician first and foremost, which I did when I was first suffering with insomnia. They told me, this is how you treat it. This is how you treat it. See you later kind of a thing.
Right.
But cannabis is very, very different in the way that I want to provide people with enough education about themselves and help them discover themselves and discover the cannabis plant and how it works in their bodies so that they become empowered and autonomous in their dosing, because this is their medicine. I always call this people's medicine because from ancient times, we've been provided with this plant, and that it needs to come back into our toolboxes, especially as women. And this is it's relatively, I guess, stereotyping, but typically a female figure in a family or in a society is a healer. It's kind of no different in nursing that we're mostly female dominated. So how can we arm women with this information about the cannabis plant and get them spreading this amongst their communities as the healers that they are, or just amongst their family members, and just empower them in their use so it becomes like an ancient tool like it used to be?
Yeah, that's really great points all around there, and I think it does make a lot of sense. As you said, it's not stereotyping to say that I think that women typically and traditionally are healers, and most, there are a lot more female nurses than male, and I think that just falls into place with one another. And another part that you mentioned, which is also very, very true, is I always kind of, once I started delving into cannabis myself and just kind of learning more about it after, using it and all that, to find out that this has been something that has been not only utilized by humans for tens of thousands of years, but we've also evolved alongside of it so that we have that endocannabinoid system that you just mentioned, that this is something that's not like when you first ingest it. These are all new chemicals that your brain is kind of dealing with. This is something that is baked into our biology that is meant to receive cannabinoids. And the fact that we have that in our system and we have those receptors and we have these tens of thousands of year history of using it for different reasons. And then in 1937, it gets prohibited. And so it's really just for even the last less than 100 years, but some very successful manufactured misconceptions, as I call them, the reefer madness stuff, the original, drug czar, the Harry Anslinger guy. And there's a lot of dark history in the initial sort of FBI and how America used racism and xenophobia and fear and kind of baked all of that together with the word marijuana and just wrapped up everybody's fears in the drug, it's in the plant. And we're still trying to get out from under that very successful branding that they did. And I think what you're doing with the Canna Queens Club and Cannabis Nurses, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's great that you are spreading this kind of education to people around the world who can really benefit from it. Because as I'm sure you know too, as a nurse, the pharmacy industry, big pharma and stuff, they're a huge part of what's keeping cannabis down, because as I'm sure you experienced firsthand, when they can prescribe you 3 or 4 medications to deal with one symptom, but then the medication that you're taking for that symptom causes other symptoms that you then need to be prescribed other things for. That's a good thing for their business model, but it's not so good for us who is feeling this weird cocktail of all these substances, as opposed to maybe cannabis alone would be enough to get you into a better place. And I think that what you're doing is great, and I hope that soon we can kind of get out from under that, this negative connotations that everybody has. The stigma is very strong still, but, people like you and others, I think, getting the message out there, it's the waves are going to break the wall at some point. The momentum is there.
For
I think
sure.
you can feel it.
And every individual that I interact with, either on like a one-on-one basis or in group settings that I'm teaching, my teaching starts with the history of cannabis. It doesn't start with the endocannabinoid system and all of those kind of jazz. It starts right with the history.
That's a good choice, because, you don't want to leap ahead too far. You want to start at the beginning, for sure. That's good.
And it's like a piece for me to give myself permission to unapologetically consume cannabis, because it worked for me, was knowing about that history. So I want to empower people with that knowledge and being aware of, examining that time in history. It was just such a prime time as we had like the rise of neo-Nazism and the idea of race purification. It just hit at such a perfect time to create such a perfect storm and such a powerful storm. And so if we can start to bring that knowledge to the people, then that's when we really start to see a change in stigma.
Right on. And it's another reason why I'm glad just to see you as well, like using the word cannabis in your branding, Cannabis Nurses, Canna Queens Club. And it's the same reason I titled the show this way, and I've mentioned it on episodes before. Yeah. Even the word marijuana it was created with all that bad branding in mind. So all of those negative connotations, all that fear, all that xenophobia, all that stuff we were just talking about, that is there in the word marijuana. And just the same way that a swastika at a snapshot makes people think of Nazism, the word marijuana makes people think of all those negative parts of it. And that's why, one of the many reasons why cannabis is just, a better word overall. At least it's neutral, right? Scientifically accurate and
absolutely.
neutral.
And I teach that to individuals too. I encourage them, we don't use the word marijuana anymore. It's a racial slur. It's not indicative of the plant. It's not the right word.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you'll never hear me use the word marijuana. I'll never type it. It'll always be cannabis.
And I appreciate that. I feel the same way too. And to be fair, like I have spoken with people on the show before who are journalists or they're representatives of government, and there are certain things, like for instance, when the government makes like the Safe Banking Act or the marijuana, the MORE Act, they were considering the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment Act, all that. When they're using it in an official capacity, the journalists oftentimes are powerless to change that because in order to be factually accurate, they have to use the language the government uses. So I understand when someone tells me they wrote an article and that's why it's in the headline or that's why it's in their body or whatever. So I do get that we're still kind of, people have to know what you're talking about and we're still parsing the language out. But this point that we're talking about right here, that basically marijuana is a bad word, it's a slur, and it shouldn't be used anymore. I do hope that this starts to percolate out into the general populace and everyone's consciousness, because every time I read marijuana in a headline or I hear somebody say it in a public forum, it almost then sort of primes me to think that they're on the negative side of it, right? Like if you use that word, it's kind of like, I'm already thinking that your argument is anti, and I think that there are people who use it that don't necessarily want to be in that camp,
Yep, that makes total sense. It's going to take time, right?
Definitely. Well, listen, Kayla Sanmartin, CEO and creator of Canna Queens Club and the Cannabis Nurses, and the writer of the upcoming accredited cannabis nursing program. Thank you very much for joining the show. I like to end these interviews with quick hits, just about 5 very quick yes or no questions about what you like in life. Are you game for this?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, great. First quick hit question here: morning bird or night owl? Which are you?
Morning bird.
Yeah, I get that. Favorite cuisine or special meal? Like if you have a birthday or you've just, passed your program being educated about cannabis and you're celebrating, what's a meal or a restaurant that you're going to hit? No question.
Ooh, that's a hard one. Usually any of my sisters cooking, farm to table. Anything she'll make, it's amazing. So
well, that's great. If you have a capable private chef, then that beats everything. Yeah,
restaurants don't quite compare. Pretty lucky.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, good for you. So anything your sister makes qualifies, then that sounds good. A drug of choice, I always ask this of all my guests, meaning what's your daily fix? It sounds, I gather from you and I both, cannabis is high up there, but I also am curious, do you like coffee or tea? Are you a wine or a beer drinker? Is there any other substance that you kind of lean on in a regular capacity?
I'm definitely more of a tea drinker, but probably hemp hearts are in my daily everything to get those omega-3s and 6s in for anandamide. So yeah, omegas are huge, and then cannabis is always in there.
Right, that's perfect. Did you? I just want to make sure. Did you say hemp parts, like other
hemp parts? Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just kind of curious. How do you personally? How do you go about working those into your day?
Oh, usually always with breakfast somehow. Either if it's with the yogurt or on toast or whatever it might be. But usually to start my day, I always think, okay, how am I going to nourish my endocannabinoid system? Because our circulating anandamide is always at its lowest when we wake. So getting in a fermented food, so a yogurt or sourdough, and then having those healthy fats from the hemp parts, having those omega-3s and 6s in there. And so that's typically how I start every day.
Wow. This is great to know. I'm going to start looking for those.
And some CBD.
Right.
And CBD.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Let's get all the trichomes in there. You want to make sure it's the complete plant thing. Where do you, I'm not asking for any sort of business plug, but where do you typically pick up your hemp parts if you, to mix in with your breakfast?
Oh, I just grab them at Costco. They've got a good supersized bag there of organic hemp parts. So.
Good to know. There you go. Listener, get out to Costco. Get a big bulk supply of those hemp parts. And number 4, quick hit, music. What is your, if you're getting amped up or if you want to calm down after a stressful day, is there a band or an artist or any genre of music that you tend to turn to?
I would definitely say some blues, likely blues, and some more old school country or bluegrass country. My husband's a musician, so that's usually kind of the music that's going on in our house.
Oh, nice. Very, very nice. And that also, sister gets the good food going. She's the chef and the husband's the musician. You're covered. This is great.
Yeah, seriously, we don't have to head into the city very often.
Yeah. Why would you? You don't got to spend any money, and you get the good stuff. stuff. I love it. And then finally movie or TV content, end of the day or end of the week, and you're just kind of, wanting to sit down with your family and just kind of enjoy some stuff and turn off the brain. What do you like to watch?
Well, it's usually whatever's dictated by my 4.5-year-old, so usually some kind of cartoon. I'm in that phase of life. What's TV as an adult?
Oh gosh, so they're the 4.5-year-olds driving the ship. Is it Paw Patrol? So Paw Patrol. These young.
We phased out of that one, which is very lovely. But now there's some kind of Gabby's Dollhouse or something. I don't quite know what's happening.
Oh well, hopefully one day, they won't be 4.5 forever. So one day you can start elevating the maturity level of the content in the house.
Seriously.
Well, great. Well, again, Kayla, thank you so much for jumping on the show today, and thanks for everything you're doing with the Canna Queens Club and the Cannabis Nurses. And again, if whether you anywhere in the world, if you want to jump on those Zoom meetings with Kayla to learn a little more about cannabis, you can find those at her website, which is the cannabisnurses.ca. And keep an eye out for that program.
It's going to be accredited worldwide, so it's open to any nurses that are interested.
Well, there you go. So it doesn't matter where you are for that one either. Just look for the cannabis nursing program, which Kayla's creating right now, and that's going to benefit a lot of people, I can tell. So thank you again, Kayla. Really appreciate your time.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, listener. If you're interested in finding out more about what Kayla has going on, you can check out the website, thecannabisnurses.ca, or you can search the Canna Queens Club, CANNA Queens Club on Facebook, and you can join that page and check out some of the talks that Kayla hosts. Some great information coming out of there, and I'm very excited to see how she contributes to healthcare and just how she's going to be able to improve the quality of life for so many people throughout her career. I think it's going to benefit a lot of people for a long time. And on a related note, I wanted to follow up on something that came up during my conversation with Kayla, and you've heard me talk about it on the show before, listener. If you've heard past episodes, this has come up a lot, and it's the nomenclature marijuana versus cannabis. Right? I've talked with a few guests about it, and it came up with Kayla as well about how marijuana is a dirty word, and I wrote a short essay basically explaining that it is a dirty word, and I'm arguing that it's time that we stop using this word. As I mentioned earlier, you got 21 states who've legalized this for recreational purposes. More Americans than ever before approve of decriminalizing or recreationally legalizing cannabis. It's been used for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, for various quality of life improvements. You've heard me talk on the show already in these 30 episodes I've done. There is compelling evidence out there already with how much and how many different ways your life can be improved by introducing cannabis into it. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect for everybody. I don't think it's just a panacea. I don't think it's a perfect solution, but it's clear beyond a doubt, I believe, that there is medical value and there's recreational value to it as well. And it's important to, as we move forward and when the federal government does get its act together and finally decriminalize this and remove it from the Schedule 1 substance, I think we should move forward with a clean slate. And in order to do that, we need to be using a word that is neutral, that doesn't have this baggage of xenophobia, of manufactured racism, of fear-mongering, of lies. Frankly, we don't need all that baggage and that false propaganda. All of that is wrapped up in the word marijuana. Anyway, I go into some more detail in the essay that I wrote, and I'm going to share this paper. I will put it on the show website and social pages, and I'll send it out in a press release as well. So if you're interested, you can read more. And finally, lastly, before I let you go here, listener, there was a story that came up that I thought was worth your attention as well. This is an article that I found. It's on the growthop.com, and it was published on October 20th, so this is a few weeks old, admittedly, here. But the headline is, After Weed Trucks Seized in New York, Uncle Bud Launches App to Gift Cannabis. Consumers donate to receive cannabis flower, vaporizers, edibles, cartridges, and pre-rolled joints with same-day delivery. So Uncle Bud is a Harlem-based business. First came on the scene, some colorful cannabis trucks have been moving around New York. You might have seen some images of these or some articles that have come up about them. Consumers would go to the trucks and basically could donate or received gifts of cannabis. But after all 12 of the business's trucks were confiscated by police last month, Uncle Bud now offers same-day delivery across the city with the launch of a new app. Uncle Bud is quoted here saying, "Since our trucks were confiscated, we rolled out a high-tech Uber Eats style weed delivery app." He goes on, "It's very simple. If you're 21, you get on the app, upload your driver's license, pick out what you want, and someone delivers it." End quote. And I just thought the innovation is really impressive. Someone's got 12 trucks rolling around New York, and I love the notion of being able to donate or gift it. I just wanted to applaud the innovation of creating this app. I also love the notion of kind of gifting and donating cannabis to different people. I mean, if you have a grow operation or sometimes, you're flush with it and you just sort of, that there's other people out there who could, who are without and could really use it. The ability to kind of donate something like that, I think, is excellent. And obviously that is not something that's kind of allowed in any legal capacity right now in any of the state markets that I'm familiar with anyway. And so I just thought that the notion of somebody creating an Uber Eats style app, giving same-day delivery for cannabis was really, really great. And I love the donation aspect too. But also, I think there's a larger point here, and this is the delivery element of cannabis. During the pandemic, delivery of alcohol was expanded widely. And some places, like here in Chicago, they kept that innovation. I think some of the availability was rolled back. You can't order it as late as you could during those days, but you're still able to order alcohol delivered from restaurants, from DoorDash through Jewel or some other grocery store, liquor stores, or wherever. You have the ability to place an alcohol delivery order. This is coming for cannabis as well. I know that there are plenty of legal state markets, recreational markets, where there is no delivery. This is definitely coming down the pipe. I believe that there is something in the works for Illinois as well. I would not be surprised to see a pilot program sometime in 2023 testing out delivery service of cannabis. Who gets in on it? I'm curious to see, but my gut tells me that it's going to be like the DoorDash, like the Uber Eats, that they're probably going to be first in line for these delivery things. They already have the infrastructure in place, and if they can just sort of add it to their app, which everybody's already using, kind of like they did with the alcohol, it just seems like the path of least resistance there. So I'm expecting that to come around the other states as well, and I just thought it was very interesting that in a very short amount of time, this Uncle Bud business in New York was able to get this app up and running and get that delivery functionality going when all their trucks were confiscated. Either way, I applaud them and I applaud the notion of, as I say, delivering cannabis, because I think that it's going to make, a whole lot of difference in people's lives too, especially medical patients who, they do have caregivers in some regard, but if you have that delivery person, I think that there's a way certainly to figure all that out. And I believe that it will be figured out, and I think that that's going to be exciting for a lot of people, and I think that it's going to just further this whole thing even more. But that's all I've got for you this week. If you have any questions or comments, click the question or comment link in the show description notes, and you can always reach out to the show on social media at C-Man Podcast, or you can email the show, host@cannabismanpodcast.com. And I always love hearing from you, what you think about the show. If you have any suggestions for guests or any questions about somebody that I've had on, or a story that I talk about, or just some more information you're curious about, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love hearing from anybody who's listening to the show. And with that, let's wrap up this 30th episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is an original production of myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music by Yusu Kim, aka Goodson. Other music by Pat Perez, and logo designed by Vorbroker Media. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, and share whenever you can.